Well, things definitely changed with this update. It's something that we were all expecting. However, we didn't really expect a lot from this update. We didn't know what was going to come out. It turns out that we majorly, I was totally off the mark. I thought it was going to be kind of DLC. I thought it was going to be like Curse of Dreadbear, but it turns out that it quite literally was just a small update to the game, in which, if you'd already beaten the game, there were small little details that you could now find inside of the game that were intended to be teasers for the next game, that being Secret of the Mimic. And no, the title is not clickbait. We may have an actual time period release date shown to us in this newest update for when Secret of the Mimic comes out. However, obviously, I have to start and say, guys, this is going to be full of spoilers. If you expected there to be no spoilers, that's kind of silly. We're talking about release dates of Secret of the Mimic, okay? If you're curious about what it is, I'll leave it inside of the description below about what the actual potential release date is if you're not trying to get spoiled, but I'm going to be telling you everything that came out inside of this newest update, or at the very least, everything we've seen so far. If any of you have already beaten Help Wanted 2, you may know that there have been a few little details here and there that have been completely new. Firstly, you'll end up going to older levels and finding, similar to how in the original game there were cassette tapes that we were supposed to be collecting, there is now a new form of collectible known as puzzle pieces. By using these puzzle pieces, we can go to an outward door of the building, in which, going out there, we will see a table with a floor that looks fairly identical to the one shown in Secret of the Mimic's teaser, in which, on this table, the more puzzle pieces we collect, the more of the puzzle that we build. I don't believe I'm going to end up showing where all of those puzzle pieces are, because even though this is a spoiler review, I want people to, be able to enjoy the game, but just know there's a bunch of puzzle pieces out there that you can solve. There's also guides on how to do it already, so if you're curious, just go and look them up. However, by collecting all of the puzzle pieces, we end up collecting two different puzzle pieces, because on the table you can also find a Vanny mask. While inside of the Vanny mask, you may notice that it builds up something that looks like a weird house of some kind. It's very abstract. However, as we continue to build it up, we end up finding out that it seems to be some sort of toy factory, making mention of masks and other things being available at this location. We can see behind it what seems to be a city and/or factory, and that could potentially be Edwin's factory mentioned inside of the books. However, we don't know 100%. Another detail that has been really on a lot of people's nerves is that in order to access a lot of these details, there seems to be one symbol that continuously keeps showing up, which is this sort of 3-triangle shape with two of the sides being a triangle within a triangle. The reason why this is important is because inside of the story Tiger Rock, when Edwin actually comes to the building, or I don't believe it's the Tiger Rock story, but I'd have to actually go see which story it's from, in which Edwin comes to the Pizzaplex and ends up seeing the inside of the baobab tree, in which, when he dies, the CEO at the time goes into the baobab tree and ends up seeing a bunch of symbols, and one of these symbols is distinctly mentioned to be a triangle within triangles. This looks fairly similar and very heavily implies that this building, whatever it is owned by Edwin. Some people don't believe that to be the sake. However, I think it's iffy on whether or not this is actually owned by Fazbear Entertainment or owned by Edwin. However, there is a bit of evidence that seems to suggest this is actually Fazbear Entertainment's original toy company and where they originally came from. The reason why a lot of people believe that is because when you actually put all of the pieces together and you get to see the 3D model of the location, we end up getting a window, and inside of that window you can end up seeing a little image, which I should have put on screen, which shows both Bonnie and Freddy. Now, the reason why this is important is because this building is from 1979, which to our knowledge is before Fredbear's Family Diner, or around when Fredbear's Family Diner opened up. That's extremely important because why is it that on this we end up seeing what appears to be a blue Bonnie? We also have what appears to be Freddy, however his color is not easily identifiable. Some people might see it as Fredbear, however I personally think that it could just be Freddy. However, if this is the case, why are these two characters here and not Spring Bonnie and Fredbear? We've always assumed that these two characters were the originals from the Fazbear Entertainment franchise, the ones who started it all, and that Freddy's was a knockoff of Fredbear's. However, this seems to suggest the opposite. If you go back and remember, for Fredbear's Family Diner or Fredbear's Singing Show, which it originally was, which may potentially even date back to this building, he is referred to as Freddy inside of that ticket, which is interesting. Does this imply that before Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, Freddy and Bonnie already existed, and that they were characters being used as mascots, costume mascots, for Fazbear Entertainment back in the toy days? That seems to be what it's suggesting, but I think there's a few more small details that are pretty cool here, that being the fact that Bonnie seems to be associated with the moon. You can see on the image there is a bunch of stuff about the moon and the sun, having the moon be for the rabbit and having the sun be for Freddy. The reason why this is important is because we've already had a feeling that Sun and Moon were from the olden time period of days. We already know that he existed in Fall Fest of 1983. We know that because of the carousel level. However, this seems to suggest that maybe he's as old as the Mimic. And something really interesting that I don't think a lot of people pointed out is the fact that, as Matt said, these characters seem to have similar details like their teeth. Does that imply that Edwin may have been the one who built Sun and Moon? That's a pretty big, piece of evidence that we've never seen before discussed, and I think that's a pretty cool thing to think about. And they seem to fittingly match that, where it's this idea of this bright, sunny, good person and this dark, evil, bad person during the night. I'm curious about how all of these pieces fit together. It's even more curious that we know that this character was originally supposed to be in a theater. He was not supposed to be a daycare attendant, which makes me wonder if maybe that was his original purpose, that back in the 70s he was a theater character. He was one of Fazbear Entertainment's newest animatronics at the time, built by Edwin. There are a lot of details that we keep getting with each new update that are pretty cool. We also finally got an answer to the Tiger Rock plushie update, because I want to talk about that real quick before I spoil what the other puzzle was. If you guys actually went and played the game, you would know that despite the teaser that we got, in-game the Tiger Rock plush does have both a blue and green eye, finally putting that little debacle to bed. I think it was silly. It really was silly. I don't know why it was an argument in the first place. Come on, guys. Don't be like that. Now, moving on from that, we then have what is outside of the Vanny network. Now, this is really important context because a lot of people actually don't think about this, but it seemingly is suggesting that we're looking at two different events from two different time periods, because essentially, inside of the Vanny mask, we are seeing this toy location that is seemingly built by Edwin, or that Edwin is important to it. If that's the case, this could suggest that this is actually a memory from something connected to the Vanny network. And wouldn't you know, after you've beaten the game, and you've done the little steps, which I believe is touching a button on the hippo, or Psychic Hippo's machine, essentially, now when you go to try and collect the plushies, instead it will give you a Tiger Rock plushie. And that's when the Tiger Rock plushie shows up and when the Mimic shows up and all that stuff, seemingly suggesting that after Glitchtrap was killed in the ending of Help Wanted 2, the Mimic comes back to its normal form. It is now in control of the Vanny network, which makes complete sense. After all, at the end we saw Cassie fall back down to where the Mimic was. The Mimic has full control over the Vanny network now, which means Glitchtrap's dead, all of that stuff is gone, it's now all about the Mimic. And this means that this is an actual detail potentially from the Mimic's memories, that the Mimic is remembering where it was originally built, what time period it was originally built, and where it's been. Meanwhile, if you don't use the Vanny mask and you complete the puzzle, that being the van it is a van. The reason why this is important, a lot of people thought that this is actually the van that went on to kill David. I don't think that's the case, because inside of the van, if you check the back of it, we have the M.X.E.S machine. The reason why this is really important is because the M.X.E.S machine, we already figured, was from the 70s. We were already told that it was a really old machine. However, what a lot of people have been denying for the longest time is that M.X.E.S and the entity, who Scott Cawthon referred to as M.X.E.S as well, were separate characters. However, we finally have confirmation that M.X.E.S from 1979 is the same exact entity that we are seeing in the modern day ruin. It can't be Glitchtrap, it can't be anything else. It was built from 1979 and is still the same character it was back then. However, a lot of people think that the people driving this van aren't Fazbear Entertainment, even though that is a belief. It isn't the person who killed David. They think that it may be Vanessa and Gregory, bringing the M.X.E.S machine to Security Breach, or to the Pizzaplex, in order to make sure the Mimic cannot escape. Essentially, a lot of people got confused about something being down there for a very long time. I think that it's implying that the Mimic ended up, under construction, ended up getting stuck inside of the tunnels down there inside of underneath the Pizzaplex, and that when they ended up finding it by being lured down there, they ended up bringing the M.X.E.S machine from Edwin or Fazbear Entertainment or wherever the hell it was to the Pizzaplex in order to make sure the Mimic could not escape. That seems to be what we're being told here. This has all been pretty giant information. However, there's just one little detail that I know you all have been waiting for. It's what was inside of the title. In order to access what shows the entity, we see a keypad that requires you to go into the Vanny network and go and look at the toy factory, in which when you get close to it, there is a mailbox that's labeled 4625. The reason why this is important is because 4625 is the code to unlock M.X.E.S and what has the whole cutscene play and what ends the game mode. And you know what else matches up with 4625? A date. April 6th, 2025. Some people actually interpret this to be June 4th, 2025, but either way, these are two dates that are really heavily implied by the game itself to be the release date of Secret of the Mimic. And that is everything I think, personally, is majorly important to the story here. There are a few other details, such as we actually get to see the Jackie live inside of the new game, which is incredibly awesome. You find her card over in one of the sister location levels. And other than that, I don't think there's been any other... I'll let you know if there's any other details that I missed, but to me, I believe that's everything that's new with inside of this update. It wasn't as big as a lot of us thought it was going to be, but when it comes to lore, this is pretty big. This is telling us a lot of new stuff. And lastly, I'm gonna put this out on a limb. Look at the window again. I know a lot of people aren't going to pay that much attention to it. However, I think it's fairly important that there are 3 crystals, one underneath the Bonnie, one underneath the Freddy, and one in the middle. I believe these are representations of William Afton, Henry Emily, and Edwin Murray, the 3 most important men to this franchise. And that is everything new in Help Wanted 2's update. Until I see you guys again, matane.